and welcome. This is Business Edge on News Central. I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. Our headline story. On January the 1st, Africa formally started her much-anticipated intra-Africa trade area deal. But before this, there has been, of course, trading with other continents and blocs across the globe. Today, we'll be looking at trading across blocs and how this has benefited Africa, maybe, over the years. We'll also touch base with a few stories we're keeping our eyes on with NC4 to watch before we wrap the show. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Now, the United Kingdom has formally prepared to leave the European Union. Now, there has been lots of discussions on what its newly independent trade strategy will look like. But the reality of potential trading agreements of England with the EU has been achieved, and a new one with the US is almost certain. But far less is expected when it comes to Africa. The continent is facing its first recession in a quarter of a century, and as the UK cuts back on aid spending from 0.7% to 0.5% of its gross national income, the need for a more progressive trade relationship is more vital than ever. This may be understandable given that the UK's trade with Africa in total amounted to £36.2 billion, which represented just 2.5% of the UK's total commercial engagement in 2019. However, Brexit, combined with changing dynamics on the continent, has provided a huge opportunity for the UK and African countries to rethink their trade relations. What we have seen was regional agreements across Africa, and now more are likely on the way and could be signed in 2021. Until the UK finally exits from the EU's single market at the end of the year, most African exports to the UK continue to enjoy preferential access in terms of the Generalized System of Preferences, GSP, and everything but arms, EBA, arrangements of the EU, provided that they comply with applicable rules of origin. Now, there has been some progress in negotiating interim economic partnership agreements with the EU, but their implementation is a bit more complicated. They are not World Trade Organization compatible and reciprocal free trade area agreement. The SADC-EU Economic Partnership Agreement is to date the only comprehensive and WTO-compatible FTA agreement between the EU and a specific configuration of African states. It entered into force in October 2016. The African members are the 5 SACU members and Mozambique. This is a reciprocal trade agreement with asymmetrical features in favor of the African parties to the agreement. It allows for duty-free and quota-free access in the EU markets, including the UK. Now, in 2019, the largest exporter to China from Africa was Angola, followed by South Africa and the Republic of Congo. And in 2019, Nigeria was the largest buyer of Chinese goods, followed by South Africa and Egypt. Now, getting straight into our conversation, I have joining me today the former Director General of the Nigeria British Chamber of Commerce and the Nigeria American Chamber of Commerce. He's also a lawyer, governance practitioner, and development consultant, Joyce Akpata. Joyce, hello, welcome to Business Edge.
It's my pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's get straight into our conversation. Trade with Africa is increasing, but it's by far not in the region where African countries need or even want it to be. So in your opinion, what do you think should be done in order to increase the volume of trade for it to benefit Africans? So what we have is so much exports, or rather imports, coming into the continent, but the balance of trade is quite unfair with what we are sending out to the rest of the world. How can we change this?
Okay, so thank you very much. I think it's very, very key in this instance in trying to increase current trade between Africa and the UK, and indeed for any other country, for Africans to carry on a very aggressive investment promotion drive, to be able to sell what we have to other nations that would attract them and bring in investment in the various areas. It's also very critical to explore increased bilateral investment treaties. There are some that are already in existence, and some are quite dated. So it's a responsibility that African governments have to explore improving or increasing the number of bilateral investment treaties they sign with other nations, and in this case, the UK. It's also very key that the treaties that are already in existence, that these are effectively implemented. You have quite a number of treaties that are focused on encouraging import-free duty for exports to some of these Western countries. And this has not been fully explored or maximized by a lot of African nations. So it's important that they step up, and provide an opportunity for local manufacturers or local producers or local exporters to take advantage of some of these export-free treaties and duty exemptions that are available.
Okay.
Of course, definitely increase manufacturing manufacturing activities locally would also help in boosting trade with other regions.
Okay, so let's talk about bottlenecks. And I think that's an area where even when consideration for AfTA was coming in and all the conversations around it, we all agree in many ways that there are unfortunately many bottlenecks to trading and doing business across the continent with specific African countries. But when you think about Africa as a bloc, as it is now in the context of this conversation, where are the bottlenecks when it comes to Africa trading with the rest of the world?
Well, key bottlenecks would be that due to high cost of production locally as a result of declining infrastructure, power being a key thing, our cost of production is quite high, and that now makes the final goods cost a bit higher, and that way we're not competitive in the international market. So these are some of the challenges that face local manufacturers or local producers. Of course, issues around multiplicity of taxes that businesses in Nigeria or Africa have to deal with is also a major challenge that deters trade. You have issues around financing. A lot of organizations, a lot of companies always have that challenge in terms of financing their products or production. Those are some of the key things I think we want to look at. Infrastructure, financing, are major things that have deterred growth in trade. Okay.
So the UK's trade, coming back to the UK specifically now, with Africa at the end of 2019 reached about $48 billion. Now, do you expect that this will grow? And by how much possibly after the UK fully leaves the EU and they're looking for other markets in order to, of course, sort of make up for the loss of preferential treatment or whatever terms it may be with the EU's trading bloc?
Oh, definitely. I would expect the trade to grow. Why would I do so? Because the UK is aggressively seeking more markets, outside the EU, given Brexit, And incidentally, today you have the UK Africa Investment Summit, which is being held virtually. The first was last year, being held virtually today. It just shows you how intentional the UK has been, in trying to attract more. Or been trying to boost its trade relationships with Africa, and I think also how Africa recovers from COVID will also be a key factor, because definitely COVID has affected our economy, and a lot of economies are going into recession. So how fast we're able to come out of that will be a determining factor. And of course, with the AfCFTA in place as well, we would expect that there will be an increase in trade. We would expect that foreign companies would explore how they can take advantage of the opportunities that the AfCFTA brings, to boost trade. So it's, for me, I think it's very, very key that African governments must encourage local industrialization that would help in attracting foreign direct investment, to assist in boosting these trades. Of course, you would expect that the UK would look into expanding into Africa and perhaps looking at having some production hubs, based in Africa. Businesses would always explore, where they feel they would have a comparative advantage if they make investments there. So we would expect that, yeah.
Okay, you've touched on my next question just a bit. I was looking at, in terms of trade partnerships and deals, what do you think the UK would be looking at as it looks to deepen trade with other countries and blocs? So you touched on the fact that they'll be looking for areas where they have competitive advantage or comparative advantage and competitive advantage. You'll also be looking for places where they can easily set up factories for production on the continent. What else do you think they'll actively be looking for when it looks to deepening their partnership or their relationship with African countries and even regional blocs?
I think they definitely would explore creating more bilateral or free trade agreements with quite a number of regions. I am aware that before now, a lot of these regions or countries within Africa had existing bilateral agreements with the EU. Some of these countries have rolled over these agreements with the UK. Some are still yet to do that. So I want to believe the UK would explore, either rolling over those agreements with other countries or signing new bilateral or regional agreements to boost free trade.
All right, so let's talk about what we can do. So we have a situation where a party to what was then the largest trading bloc in the world, the EU, has left. They're looking for new markets. They're looking for new ways. It seems a situation where we might just take anything they hand to us, which we don't want to be so. We don't want Africa to continue just taking what is given to us, taking what others bring to the table. So what do we do as African nations to take advantage of this? Not just the situation with the UK, but we're also seeing some interesting situations play out with the United States and China over the past few years in terms of the trade wars and positioning. So let's really talk about how African countries can position ourselves to take advantage of this and not just take what is handed to us or what is proposed to us.
Okay, key thing is, what do we have? Key thing is, what do you have? You can only give what you have. So it's very, very key that we look inwards and identify key things that we feel would position us at an attractive stance with these countries. I mean, our population is a very something we could use to our advantage. A lot of UK or Chinese businesses or foreign businesses have explored this. If you look at Ethiopia, you have a large textile industry which is booming, and a lot of these industries are hubs which have been created by US, UK, or Chinese companies because they have seen that in terms of capacity locally at their own space, they are not able to produce to meet demand. And extending these manufacturing hubs to Africa and taking advantage of the labor market in Africa, which is very large, in their production, is very key. And I think this would significantly help or boost economic activities in these countries. Because imagine a country like Nigeria being a massive production hub, especially for garments, because you have large exports of these items to Western countries. Imagine what that would do to our population in terms of industrial activity, in terms of job creation, and because it's a whole value chain. So definitely those would have a positive impact. In terms of agriculture as well, we've been talking about the need to industrialize agriculture, given the vast arid lands that we have in this country, and take advantage of that. If we have large investments in this area, I think that would help. Okay. Of course, we can't over-talk about issues of industrialization. Currently, we have a lot of exports from Nigeria to Western countries. Unfortunately, a lot of these exports are raw commodities. Okay. We're not able to add any value. And really, when you export these things without adding any value, you really are not making good margins, So investment in factories, and production hubs are key things we needed to look at. And of course, government has to explore how to attract these investors. Key things would be, looking at tax exemptions, issuing pioneer status, to encourage some of these companies' ability to repatriate their funds. So many other things we can look at.
Okay, I think I like this point where we'll pause the conversation, but every time we have a conversation about trade and making sure that we're seeing more African exports going out of the continent, this issue of the value chain really comes up. And as you said, we tend to be at the very beginning of the value chain with the raw materials, which means that we lose out on the money to be made further down the value chain. We'll keep talking about this. We're going to take a quick time out on Business Edge. This is, of course, happening right here on News Central. We're talking trading across blocks, Africa to the world. My guest is Joyce Akpata. She's a governance practitioner, lawyer, and development consultant. And the conversation on trading across blocks, Africa to the world, continues right here on Business Edge. Now, let's expand the conversation, Joyce, a bit beyond the UK. We've seen Russia has been making some silent inroads into Africa, mostly into Central Africa. Why do you think it seems they've stayed mostly in that region and they've not moved to, I guess, more liberalized, more areas of the continent, which include the West, the East, and the South?
For Russia, well, I think it's a derivative of their history since the Cold War. They had relationships with a lot of these countries, and they are leveraging on those relationships now. When it comes to other regions, West Africa, I think you would see Russia as an outsider. And the only thing that I think would attract Russia would be some very good incentives that would be able to catch their attention, and make them explore other nations. It's also obvious, that China, the EU, and the US have a strong hold on a lot of African nations in this region. So Russia will definitely concentrate on where it believes that it has a competitive advantage over the Western nations. So I mean, really, in terms of would they think of coming into West or East Africa, we can only speculate. It's a matter of perception. It's a matter of what strategy they want to employ. A good example is when they say when North Cube came to Nigeria, he found that Maggi had a stronghold in the south, so he focused his attention and concentrated on the north, and then established a very strong base there, and then gradually moved to other areas. So maybe the Soviets have found a niche, and they are putting all their energies there. And who knows, tomorrow they might change strategy and explore other regions.
Okay, so let's talk about China now. China has taken the lion's share of trade with Africa. In 2019, the value of China-Africa trade was $192 billion, up from $185 billion the previous year. Now, could this be linked to the funds African nations have been borrowing, or is this trade part of a debt repaying agreement? Where is the trading coming from? Where is the money that this intra-Africa, China-Africa intra-trade is happening? Where is it coming from?
Well, I think you've answered some of the questions yourself, I mean, Africa has a huge reliance on China for infrastructure financing, and from what I've observed, it seems, the terms of those agreements always insist that all the goods, all the services must come in from China, sometimes up to labor, So I think African nations have gotten themselves tied in this, And what would be attracting them also would be issues of debt repayment. What the Chinese offers is attractive. Chinese products are cheaper. You also have long-term credit offered to Chinese companies by these Chinese long-term credit offered to Chinese companies by the Chinese government. Which makes it easier for them to execute these projects. And makes them more competitive. Compared to companies from the Western world. And I think they have a very strong backing from their government. The Chinese companies. And of course, if you look at the Chinese man and compare the Chinese man to a Westerner, the Chinese man is more aggressive with his marketing. They go out there and, once they make a headway into a particular sector, they are there in full force, and they take advantage of every opportunity. They are not laid back in any way. They have very high risk appetite, I would say, compared to their counterparts from the Western nations. Yeah.
Okay, so staying on this, we know that in 2019, Nigeria was the largest buyer of Chinese goods on the continent, followed by South Africa and Egypt. These nations are not exporting close to what they're bringing in, and we're hearing stories of containers going back either fully empty or partially empty when they're returning back to China. And this is a very clear imbalance of trade that's happening. How can this be addressed, particularly with a nation such as Nigeria, as we've talked about earlier, a very large population, labor force that's there, but that also means there's a market as well. So people are taking advantage of our market, but we're not finding ways to take advantage of whatever it is we can offer them. So how do we address this imbalance of trade?
That's going to be very challenging because, like I had said earlier, what do we have?
Yeah.
So if we had goods, if we had services that China needs, then we sell it to China. But really, if you can't give what you don't have. If we don't have anything, or we've not thought of what it is that is critical for us to give back to China, then we'll be always at the receiving end. It's going to be very tough because, China has an industrial capacity that no other nation has.
Yeah.
The whole world practically manufactures in China.
Sure.
So really, almost everything comes from China.
So it looks like that is an answer that we need to spend more time, more research, and more investigation to really see how we can maybe not completely equal it, but at least find a way to reduce that imbalance of trade.
Yeah, so perhaps services is something we could explore offering.
All right. So I'll have to stop the conversation here because of time. Joyce Akpata, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a really interesting conversation, and thank you for sharing your insights. She's the former Director General of the Nigerian British Chamber of Congress, as well as the Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce, I beg your pardon. Joyce, thank you so much. We'll see you again next time.
All right, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Have a good one. All right, guys, you know what that means. Up next is NC4 to watch as we wrap things up very quickly. Now, Angola is looking for ways to fight a surge in piracy in the Gulf of Guinea, the Great Lakes region, and other areas along its coast. The Secretary of State for External Relations said the growing maritime crime problem is endangering the region from a national, international, and regional point of view. The biggest factor that will determine the oil price this year is to what extent demand will return to normal levels. This year started with fuel price increase in South Africa of more than 40 cents per liter for petrol and 55 cents per liter for diesel, raising the question of what motorists can expect for the rest of 2021. Private equity investors in Southern Africa are closing deals again after a virus-induced lull, tapping a cash pile that stood at more than 30 billion rand in June, and this is according to an industry association. Businesses in the education, healthcare, and retail sectors operating online are among the top picks for investors seeking to take advantage of market gaps amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, Egypt's imports shrank by 12% in 2020 to approximately $63.587 billion compared to the $71.862 billion recorded in 2019. And this is coming directly from the Minister of Trade and Industry. And the minister said that the significant decline in imports can be attributed to Egypt starting domestic manufacturing of some production requirements instead of importing them. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. A very big thank you for joining. We'll be back once again tomorrow. But until then, keep watching News Central. I'm Tolu Lokwe Adileru Balogun.